Welcome back, everyone. In this video, I'm going to be going over investing for beginners. So I'm going to be covering a few simple ETFs that all beginners can pretty much invest in and not be concerned about how their money is going to be doing over time. And I am specifically going to be covering ETFs managed by the fund issuer Vanguard. This is a popular fund issuer and they are one of the largest in the business. And as you could see on screen, there are quite a few ETFs out there to invest in. So I know that for beginners, it can kind of be overwhelming for people to pick which ETF they want to invest in. So I hope that this video can provide some insight. Before we get into it, if you do appreciate content like this, please be sure to leave this video a like to get this content out there to a wider audience. It would be greatly appreciated, and also subscribe for future content if you want to keep up to date on new videos. So first up on the list is the third most popular ETF based on assets under management, and that is the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, ticker symbol VOO. Just starting off, we can get some information from the fund page itself, and the intent of this ETF is to invest in stocks in the S&P 500 index, which represents 500 of the largest US companies in the United States. So if you want some great diversification and you want some big, large companies, this is a great ETF to invest in. And in fact, many people invest in this ETF alone because many people believe is sufficiently diversified. The ETF offers a very low expense ratio. It is one of the lowest out there at 0.03%. Now, for the beginner investors, this is not something that you have to pay out every year to own this ETF. This comes out of the net assets under value of the ETF, so you don't even see this being deducted. This is all priced into the value of the ETF. I know a lot of beginner investors, myself included, when I started investing a long time ago, I wondered, where does this money come from? Do I have to pay this out of pocket? And the answer is no, it simply comes from the actual price of the ETF itself. So as the ETF methodology indicates, it invests in the top 500 largest companies in the United States. So the number of stocks you would think would be right around 500. In fact, there's 503 stocks, probably because there's a little bit of tracking variation, and it may be holding things like small money market amounts too that the fund issuer is required to report. So that's why there is a little bit of difference there, and it doesn't overall make too big of a deal. If anything, it adds just a slight bit of diversification, whether it be cash or other companies that this ETF invests in. If we look at how this investment breaks down, you can definitely see that this ETF is diversified across many different industries, with, of course, information technology being the largest industry, because information technology is one of the biggest parts of the economy. And as this indicates, it is the largest, with other industries coming far away in second, third, and fourth place, such as healthcare, financials, and then we trail down to things like communication services and consumer discretionary. But overall, you do see practically every single industry in this ETF, as this ETF doesn't really invest in any particular industry. It just tracks the largest 500 companies in the United States. So overall, great diversification, not only in companies, but pretty much industry as well. If we look at the top 10 holdings, I'm sure many of you are familiar with these names, are in the news quite frequently, or you may use or own some of the products that these companies provide. So Apple being number one, I'm sure that a large portion of the people watching this video probably have an iPhone. Microsoft being number two, I'm sure a lot of people watching this video may, if they're not using their iPhone, are watching it maybe on a laptop with a Microsoft operating system in the background. NVIDIA, which is a big leader in AI. Amazon, you all know that. Everybody buys products from Amazon, and they also do web hosting services. So they are also diversified across many industries as well for their revenue. Facebook, or Meta now, this also is a large, well-known company. It not only owns Facebook, but it also owns other social media things like Instagram. Alphabet and Alphabet here. Now, these are both Google. Pretty much everybody's using a Google service. You're watching this video on YouTube, which is owned by Google. Berkshire Hathaway, this is the company that Warren Buffett started. and you pretty much know his name. It is an investment management company. Eli Lilly, which I personally don't know too much about myself, but from what I do understand, this is a pharmaceutical company and it supplies drugs. So many people are continually needing to buy drugs for their prescriptions, which is, I mean, great for investors, probably not so well for them, of course, but it is a necessary industry. And then we have Broadcom, ticker symbol AVGO. This is a semiconductor company. They run in the computer space. Now, if you notice the weightings here, you see Apple's the highest weighted, and then all the way down at 1.5%, you do see Broadcom. So what you're going to notice with this is that a significant amount of the weight are going to be in the top 10 holdings of these ETFs, which is good and bad because there's a lot of top heaviness. So if the large caps do really poorly, you're going to suffer. On the other hand, they tend to do very well, so you're going to gain from that. Now, this is only page 1, and you see 1 of 10 as the holdings, but we can keep going and going and going. And I am not going to get into it because that would be probably 5 videos on its own, but just know that this ETF is very diversified. Up next on this list is going to be VTI, the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF, and many people swear by this ETF instead of VOO because instead of just investing in the largest 500 US companies, this seeks to track the total US market of large, mid, and small cap equities. So you're not only getting the big companies in the United States, you're also getting the smaller and mid-cap companies as well. Some people think that this is a moot point because the diversification that you get is kind of minimal and it doesn't really add that much of a benefit, some people believe. So VTI, similar to VOO, also has a very low expense ratio of 0.03%. And if we do scroll down, you do see that the fund has a large number of stocks, 3,656. So that is going to be about 7 times more diversification than VOO. Again, I'm not really going to get into the specifics of truly which one is better. If you want more diversification, if that's what you're looking for, then VTI, of course, would be the better pick. But people kind of get hung up on, should I invest in VTI or should I invest in VOO? And the distinction as performance goes is not too big of a difference over the long term. If we look at the industry exposure, you're going to see pretty much the same as VOO. So there's going to be a large portion in technology with other portions of the industries not even coming close to technology itself. Still sufficiently diversified across pretty much every single industry that you can think of, which is a great thing. Let's scroll down into the top 10 of this ETF. Now, I want to make a key point here. When you look at this, you're going to look at this and think, well, this is the same as VOO. And the top 10 certainly is, but here's a key difference here. If you notice the percent of the weightings of these holdings, you're going to see a difference in the amount that this fund holds compared to VOO. So here we are looking back at the weightings of VOO. And if you notice something like Apple with VOO, it sits at about 7%. But if you look back at VTI, something like Apple sits about 0.8% lower than what it is in VOO. And you are going to see these weightings get smaller and smaller as you go down. And the simple reason why is because this fund has more holdings, so you need more space to be able to put those holdings into. So you're going to keep going and going and going until you have the weights of all of these different holdings. So I am going to go to a random page here. And me personally, once you get into this low of the weightings, it pretty much is almost negligible, but there's so many, they all add up to become something more. So a lot of these companies are going to be either mid cap or small cap. Again, the intent of this ETF is to cover the US economy as a whole. So you're going to have a bunch of companies you probably never heard of, but companies that still produce earnings or revenue all the same. So now we get into holding number 3, and that is the Vanguard Total World Stock ETF, ticker symbol VT. Now, this ETF is even more diversified than VTI, which covers the entire US market, because this ETF invests in both foreign and US stocks. And some people swear by this ETF more than they do even swear by VTI or VOO. And the simple thing is because of that international diversification, there's a lot of people that are concerned that sometime the US may not perform as well as foreign countries. So this ETF does have a bit of a higher expense ratio, still rather low at 0.07%. And that is simply because of the added methodology and I suppose the difficulty to manage. Now, if we scroll down a bit, we do get into the total number of stocks, and it is going to be the largest on this specific list. And you'll really see that diversification go up. It's nearly at 10,000 different holdings, so about 3 times more even than VTI. So really, really diversified, and not only in the United States, but across many different economies. So you do see that North America is the biggest weighting at 65%. And then you see other economies too, like Europe, emerging markets, Pacific, and you also even see a bit of the Middle East as well. So great ETF if you don't want to manage foreign ETFs and just want to have a mix of both. This ETF does it for you, and you are going to be extremely well diversified across many different industries. Now, again, we go back to the top 10, and similar to the other 2 ETFs, you're going to see pretty much the same thing. The top 10 are going to all be US companies, but if you look at the percent of the fund, it's even far less than VTI. So these weightings are going to be even lower than everything because you of course need more and more space. And if we look at some of these companies, you will see that the lower you go, the more kind of obscure their names become. And I want to show you some of these foreign companies just to kind of show you that they're in here. So if we take a look, we have Sanify SA, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong because it is a foreign company. But if we do look at that, we see that the company is a French company and it is headquartered in Paris, France. It operates as a pharmaceutical and healthcare company. So again, when you buy this ETF, you're going to be buying the entire world pretty much. Again, VT is an extremely good way to diversify yourself across the entire world. And people swear by this ETF long term, as I said kind of before, because they really just don't know if the US is going to continue its bull run over the years. And you get the counter argument, well, the US is the peak of the world economy and we kind of control everything. I mean, everybody pretty much uses the dollar. So it's unlikely that the United States will decline. But with that being said, there's still a risk of a single geography. So people do like this ETF. Now, really, you could have stopped at either one of those 3. And for a new investor, at least until you get maybe tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars saved up, you can pretty much just forget about every other investment and you really wouldn't have to worry. But I'm just going to throw a few others into the mix just as a knowledge point, and because I know at the end of the day, everybody kind of looks for other investments as well. So number 4 is going to be VUG, the Vanguard Growth ETF. So as the name implies, this is going to look for US large cap growth stocks. So this tracks a growth index. Overall, a very cheap ETF for what it does, with a total expense ratio of 0.04%. And if we do scroll down, you're going to see the industry diversification be completely different. So this is going to be heavily concentrated on technology because nowadays a lot of the growth is in technology itself. And if you're really a proponent of technology, that probably won't scare you too much. And you do see with this top 10, the weightings on these top 10 are a lot higher. You also see some other growth companies in here like Tesla, like Visa, and you do see, of course, the good old common Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Amazon, Facebook, Google, And again, this is a growth ETF, so it doesn't necessarily only have tech companies, but it also has companies with a history of growing either income or revenue itself. So you're still going to find other industries as well. This, of course, is going to be for the more risk accepting growth investors. Maybe you're a little bit more young. Maybe you only want to dedicate a small portion to an ETF like this. Nonetheless, this may grow your money faster over time, and it also may cause you to lose your money faster over time too. Getting into ETF number 5, and I'm going to make this the last ETF on the list because I think for new investors, it can kind of get overwhelming on which ETF you want to buy. And if I keep going and going and going, I am never going to end, and it's going to lead to a form of information inundation. So VIG, the Vanguard Dividend Appreciation ETF. I absolutely love this ETF. It is the largest ETF I own. Just kind of perspective, I do own $42,000 of this ETF, about 215 shares. So I am really putting my money where my mouth is here. Again, I really do enjoy this ETF. So this seeks to track the performance of the S&P US Dividend Growers Index, and I am not going to get too much into that index here. I am just going to tell you it from memory, and what that index does is it pretty much tracks a number of companies with a 10-year history of growing their dividends consistently, and then filters out the highest yielding of those companies. So it's really not going to have companies that yield over 4 and 5%. It's just focusing on those good high dividend growth companies itself. This ETF has good diversification too at 337 holdings. And if we go down, you're going to see something I really do like about this ETF compared to other ETFs. This I consider a lot more well-rounded ETF with companies that are a lot less susceptible to ups and downs, because a lot of these dividend growth companies typically are a little bit more well developed, and you finally do see a little bit more of a diverse set of companies with this ETF. So you have Apple, Broadcom, Microsoft, all of which were in some of the other ETFs that I showed. But you also have JP Morgan, United Healthcare, ExxonMobil, Visa, Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, and MasterCard. I like this ETF because it really goes on a strategy of really growing that dividend over time. And I think a lot of the well-developed companies really have a much greater chance of remaining stable. There's less price fluctuations. And if a company is committed to increasing that dividend, they are probably a little less concentrated on the short term and more concentrated on just keeping that revenue coming in and possibly increasing prices on goods and services, so then they can pass that off to the shareholders. So that was a bit of a mouthful of a video, and that video was a bit longer than what I usually produce, but I definitely wanted to show some new investors some quality ETFs that they could get started investing in today without having to think about the decision too much. If you did watch this video this long, definitely consider subscribing, because it probably shows that you did enjoy this content. And please remember to give this video a like to get this content out there to a wider audience. Again, it would be greatly appreciated. I'll see you all in the next video.